Outside Huyang City, Luo Feng continued cultivating in seclusion within the city lord's mansion. Having established his inner world on the foundation of primal chaotic space and completely adapted to his identity as a world life form, he began studying secret techniques that could fully utilize the immense power of his new body. By examining the 10 directions world form based on the Silver Mountain Beast Cane, he discovered that unlike his previous imitations of primal chaos layer creatures, this form allowed him to ignite his power and unleash stronger bursts of strength. Although doing so placed much greater demands on spiritual will, he realized that he needed to comprehend specialized techniques for igniting this power. Fortunately, as a world life form possessing a special grade inheritance, he had access to many complementary secret techniques, though understanding them at the primal chaos realm remained extremely difficult. Meanwhile, in the royal palace of Shi Kingdom, the Emperor of Tienkun gathered the other 4 godly kings of the kingdom: Wuxiang Ancestor, Demon Blade Ancestor, Stream Rui Godly King, and Skull Peak Godly King. Wuxiang Ancestor and Demon Blade Ancestor had fought alongside the Emperor since they were all First Realm godly kings and still called him brother even after he had advanced to the Second Realm, while the other 2 had joined later. The Emperor's terrifying aura reflected the immense power he had gained by cultivating the primordial bloodline, a path followed by many powerful figures despite its inherent flaws. Although Second Realm godly kings initially sought to reach the ultimate realm through their own strength, many eventually turned to the bloodline path after realizing how distant the ultimate realm truly was. Both ancient countries relied heavily on primordial bloodlines, proving the effectiveness of this path despite the risks. The Emperor of Tienkun revealed that he and several allies had set an ambush within the treasure land Tianhe, intending to destroy the true body of the monarch of Yu country. Since the monarch cultivated the primordial bloodline path, losing his true body would mean losing all the enormous resources invested into it and effectively becoming bankrupt. However, the monarch had fled deep into Tianhe and continuously hid in dangerous regions, preventing them from killing him. Therefore, the emperor proposed a different strategy. Shi Kingdom would invade Yu Kingdom along their entire border, slowly capturing one primal chaos prefecture after another to force the monarch to emerge. Wuxiang Ancestor immediately understood that the monarch had only 2 choices: remain hidden while his kingdom was gradually conquered, or abandon his true body and cultivate a new one with greatly reduced strength. When Skull Peak Godly King asked what would happen if Yu Kingdom's godly kings intervened, the emperor calmly declared that anyone who obstructed them would be killed. Their true goal was not territorial expansion but forcing the monarch out of Tianhe, where his primordial bloodline granted him significant advantages in exploration. The First Realm godly kings understood this well because they had limited access to precious treasure lands and relied primarily on the income from their territories, whereas the emperor's ambitions centered on the resources of Tianhe itself, which were particularly valuable for cultivators of water-type primordial bloodlines. Demon Blade Godly King then mentioned Luo He and Huyang City, asking whether they should take action against him. The emperor dismissed the idea, saying that a single city was insignificant and that their sole objective was forcing the monarch of Yu country to act. Wuxiang Ancestor remarked that Luo He had escaped trouble. The emperor then ordered the 4 godly kings to immediately draft the invasion plan and begin as soon as possible. Outside Huyang City, Luo Feng, dressed in silver robes, experimented with one of his newly gained abilities. He touched a purple flower and stimulated its life force, causing its aura to rise from an ordinary plant to true god level, then void space true god level, and finally eternal true god level before it completely disintegrated into ashes. He repeated the experiment on a red fruit tree and many other objects, including flowers, grass, and rocks, but everything met the same fate. Even a nearby exotic beast was terrified after witnessing these transformations. Luo Feng became deeply puzzled and pondered where the flaw in his understanding of the 6 major branches of life lay. While immersed in contemplation, the complete life spirituality branch suddenly manifested in his mind. Luo Feng had long felt that he could easily comprehend the 6 major branches of the great Tao of life origin, but he had followed the guidance of his special grade inheritance and focused on mastering higher-level secret techniques instead of deliberately seeking enlightenment. Now, without intentional effort, the complete life spirituality branch naturally appeared before him. As he studied it, it resonated with his previous understanding and immediately led him to comprehend two more branches: origin of life and body of life, which he had pondered for the longest time. As Luo Feng compared these insights with the 10 directions world form, his understanding deepened rapidly, and the remaining 3 branches also became clear. The blood branch, highly coveted by many godly kings because of its benefits for cultivating primordial bloodlines; the vitality branch, which granted extraordinary life force and made complete annihilation vastly more difficult; and the life and death branch, which represented the disappearance of life as a prelude to rebirth. Luo Feng was delighted that comprehending one branch had triggered a chain reaction, allowing him to realize all 6 branches in less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea. He noted that Morosa had also comprehended all 6 branches simultaneously and acknowledged that his own accumulation in the great Tao of Destruction's origin was much weaker because the mysteries displayed by Morosa were far less profound than the complete great Tao of life origin revealed by the primordial cosmos, and because he had devoted most of his effort to perfecting the 10 directions world form. Having finally comprehended all 6 branches of the great Tao of life origin, Luo Feng made his decision without hesitation. It was time for him to become a godly king. Luo Feng gathered all his family members into his small universe and informed them that he was about to break through once again. He explained that this would be the final expansion of his small universe, as a godly king's small universe had already reached its ultimate form. He allowed his family to leave the universe and observe the entire process from outside. Under Shimo's escort, everyone boarded a flying boat and waited in the distant void, wondering whether Luo Feng's small universe, already 1 trillion light-years in diameter, could become even larger. The small universe suddenly shone brightly as boundless energy descended from a mysterious place and poured into it. The universe expanded at an astonishing speed, rapidly growing from 1 trillion to several trillion light-years in diameter. The speed of expansion far exceeded Luo Feng's previous breakthrough, shocking his family and attracting numerous experts from the surrounding regions, including human race true gods, primal chaos overlords, and experts from other races. Within only 3 months, Luo Feng's small universe finally reached 10 trillion light-years in diameter, exactly the same size as the primordial cosmos itself. Everyone was left speechless, unable to believe that a cultivator's small universe could reach such an unprecedented scale. The divine power incarnation of the primordial ancestor also witnessed the event and was deeply astonished. Even in the land of origin, no godly king's small universe had ever reached such a level because ordinary godly kings possessed inherent flaws in their foundations. Only someone with a perfect life form foundation like Luo Feng could achieve such perfection. The primordial ancestor felt that Luo Feng's future would make him an important figure throughout the entire land of origin and that he was witnessing the birth of a true miracle. As the infinite energy entered his small universe, Luo Feng's consciousness became connected with the mysterious place from which the energy originated. He learned that this was the first and last time such an energy infusion would occur. His small universe had already reached the maximum level permitted by the entire source world and now possessed a limited capacity for energy just like the primordial cosmos. He realized that, unlike the ownerless primordial cosmos, he could perfectly maintain and control the population and energy balance within his own universe forever. Through this connection, Luo Feng also understood the true purpose of a small universe. It was a form of grace bestowed by the supreme rules upon cultivators, allowing them to better comprehend the operation of the universe and absorb energy thousands or even millions of times faster, thereby supporting massive divine bodies. He realized that cultivators in the land of origin possessed such enormous divine bodies precisely because of the existence of small universes. His consciousness then perceived the 9 complete origin great Taos: time, space, life, destruction, infinite, matter, extreme point, world, and causality. He focused particularly on the great Tao of destruction origin, seeing it from countless aspects. At one moment it resembled a terrifying dark red monster capable of devouring everything. Then the true form of a beautiful and holy sector beast. And finally a giant black eye that made his heart tremble. Because he had already comprehended the 6 branches of the great Tao of destruction origin to a bottleneck. Observing the complete great Tao greatly deepened his understanding, and for the first time he felt that he could soon fully comprehend it. However, he chose not to rush. deciding instead to continue accumulating knowledge and cultivate according to the guidance of his predecessors. Luo Feng then understood that the supreme rules had bestowed all the help they could upon him. From this point onward, he would have to walk his own path. He also faintly sensed that the supreme rules themselves hoped that such an outstanding life form would eventually grow strong enough to protect them in return, implying that even the supreme rules faced unknown dangers. Before the connection ended, Luo Feng broadened his perception and saw the entire land of origin and the immeasurably vast universe ocean surrounding it. He saw the 3,000 primordial cosmoses floating at the outer edges of the universe ocean and even saw his own hometown's primordial cosmos alongside his newly expanded small universe. Looking farther still, he perceived the entire source world as a gigantic egg, with the land of origin at its core and the endless universe ocean surrounding it. Beyond the source world lay an incomprehensible dark void that he could no longer observe clearly. Soon afterward, Luo Feng's consciousness was completely expelled from the mysterious place. This merging of his spirit with the supreme rules was the only opportunity he would ever have in his entire lifetime. After returning to his physical body in the quiet room of the city lord's mansion in Huyang City, Luo Feng discovered that the original primal chaotic space within him had completely transformed into a far larger and more resilient inner space. This was the foundation that godly kings used to create their internal universes. Because the laws governing the operation of a universe were manifestations of one's own enlightenment and also a form of cultivation. At that moment, endless energy from the mysterious land surged into him like a mighty river, continuously converting into divine power and pouring into his inner space, where it formed an infinite ocean. The mysterious land showed no signs of stopping. The amount of energy was so terrifying that, in his hometown region, it would have been enough to expand a small universe to the size of the primordial cosmos in only 3 Earth months. Now, however, all of that energy was being devoted entirely to creating Luo Feng's new godly body. Luo Feng actively guided the process and used the infinite divine power to begin condensing a new body. He quickly realized that this body would become unimaginably massive and that he might not be able to completely conceal its aura. To avoid attracting attention, he immediately summoned an avatar that was far away in Chu capital and carrying the Star Tower. In only a few moments, the avatar arrived in Huyang City with the Star Tower, and Luo Feng entered it. Inside one of the Star Tower's spatial layers, Luo Feng completely released his restraints and condensed his godly body at maximum speed. The endless ocean of divine power inside his body visibly dropped in level and was soon entirely drained. However, the mysterious land continued sending energy non-stop, and every bit of newly formed divine power was immediately transformed into his growing godly body. His body rapidly increased in size, surpassing 10 trillion kilometers and then 11 trillion kilometers, continuing to grow at an astonishing speed. After only 3 days of land of origin time, his perfect divine body finally reached its absolute limit. The reckless pouring of energy from the mysterious land immediately ceased. This was the unique blessing granted by the supreme rules to every cultivator upon becoming a godly king. A one-time opportunity that could never be repeated. Luo Feng carefully sensed his completed body. The gigantic figure sat cross-legged within the Star Tower. While the tower's internal space continuously expanded to accommodate it, he discovered that his godly body had reached a height of 180 trillion kilometers. In the land of origin, the distance between heaven and earth varied slightly depending on the terrain, but it generally measured around 100 trillion kilometers. This meant that Luo Feng's body was actually taller than the sky itself. Even cultivators in the primal chaos realm with unlimited godly bodies found it difficult to cultivate bodies equal to the height of heaven and earth. As for godly kings possessing unlimited godly bodies, their normal height was generally around 36 trillion kilometers. They could easily walk on the ground and only needed to shake their bodies slightly to reach the height of heaven and earth. Luo Feng, however, had far surpassed that standard. His body was so enormous that he could not even stand upright in the land of origin. Even while sitting cross-legged, his head would nearly touch the starry sky. The Star Tower's capabilities once again amazed him. One of its spatial layers had expanded until it exceeded even his body's height while still feeling spacious. Luo Feng had long realized that the Star Tower was extraordinary. Although many cave heaven secret treasures contained vast spaces, treasures on the scale of the Star Tower possessed immeasurable value. Even now, he still could not fully comprehend its mysteries. Luo Feng then reflected on the significance of his breakthrough. The godly king-level perfect divine body represented the final form of his innate foundation. If he wished to strengthen his body or soul further in the future, he would need to rely entirely on his own cultivation. The reserves of divine power within his body vastly surpassed those of ordinary godly kings, and even the quality of his divine power was superior. His soul had also become much stronger. The creation of a small universe comparable to the primordial cosmos, combined with the nourishment from his perfect divine body, had greatly enhanced his soul foundation. Most godly kings who did not cultivate the soul path could only strengthen their souls either through the nourishment of a powerful body, which was relatively inefficient, or by using extremely rare and valuable treasures. At that moment, Luo Feng finally understood why so many cultivators in the primal chaos realm who had already comprehended branches of the great Tao would rather undergo reincarnation before advancing to godly king. They did so to compensate for their deficiencies, cultivate unlimited godly bodies, and establish the strongest possible foundations before breaking through. He now truly understood the importance of having a perfect foundation. Afterward, Luo Feng decided to transform into a world life form. With a single thought, he began converting his perfect divine body. Although the perfect divine body itself was immensely powerful, it was still inferior in combat ability to the world life form. A special grade inheritance that began at the level of an invincible first realm godly king and possessed an extraordinarily high potential. Because he had already experienced this transformation once before, the process was much smoother and faster this time. More importantly, he found it far easier to control the world life form. Although his spiritual will had not improved much after his breakthrough, his soul had become vastly larger. He compared this difference to the contrast between an army of 10,000 soldiers and an army of 1 million soldiers. Even if both armies were commanded by the same general, their combat capabilities would be completely different. In the same way, a larger soul could control a far more massive and powerful body. Perfect divine power continuously transformed into the stronger world life form, and the process lasted for 5 full days. When it ended, 2 gigantic bodies sat cross-legged inside the Star Tower. One was the black-robed perfect divine body, while the other was the silver-robed world life form. Luo Feng discovered that creating the world life form had consumed half of the divine power reserves contained within his perfect divine body. Even so, he had nearly reached the maximum burden that his spiritual will could endure. The silver-robed Luo Feng slowly stood up, and merely rising to his feet caused the surrounding space to tremble violently and produce loud resonant sounds throughout the Star Tower, demonstrating the terrifying power contained within his new body. Luo Feng realized that his powerful soul foundation and ultimate level will were barely enough to control his terrifying world life form, with more than 90% of his spiritual capacity occupied. Although the perfect divine body and the world life form possessed similar energy reserves, the latter's power was far greater, making it extremely exhausting to maintain while awake. To reduce the burden, he decided to let the world life form sleep most of the time. The silver-robed body sat cross-legged and gradually entered a slumbering state, while its breathing still created storms and the strain on his spirit became minimal. To act normally outside, Luo Feng created 3 weaker avatars. 3 streams of silver light separated from the sleeping body and condensed into 3 incarnations, each containing about 1,000th of the world life form's energy reserves. Even so, every avatar was still much stronger than the world life form he had painstakingly created during the primal chaos realm. After becoming a godly king, his divine body had grown 100 times larger and the quality of his divine power had improved by another 100 times, resulting in an overall increase of hundreds of millions of times in energy. Luo Feng judged that each avatar should be invincible within the first realm of the godly king and, because he could use numerous profound techniques, his full combat power likely surpassed ordinary first realm invincibles. He reflected on the concept of invincibility in the first realm of the godly king, which meant having attack, defense, and survival abilities all reaching the level of the second realm. However, different invincible experts had different specialties. For example, the godly king Jia Yin, who cultivated the great Taos of infinite and causality, was weaker than Luo Feng in direct combat but vastly superior in avoiding danger and seeking fortune. Luo Feng also knew that no one in the land of origin had ever heard of a first-realm godly king defeating a second-realm godly king or a second-realm godly king defeating an ultimate realm expert. Though such feats were recorded in the Treasure Land Infinite Space and were theoretically possible. Similarly, the records of the world life form stated that a first-realm godly king could theoretically achieve the most perfect body. The 24 forms. Although this became one of his future goals, he decided that his primary focus would be the Great Tao of Destruction origin. The 24 forms also appeared within the complete Great Tao of Life origin, represented by 24 claws, each embodying one aspect of the Tao. Every aspect contained intricate combinations of the 6 branches of life and was far more profound than the 10 directions world form. Fully comprehending all 24 forms was unimaginably difficult, and many cultivators would likely advance to the second realm of godly king before understanding even a few of them. For a long time, the world life form would remain Luo Feng's strongest body, so he needed to learn how to unleash its full potential. Since the Great Tao of Destruction origin excelled in battle and slaughter, he turned his attention inward to the vast space within his body that had evolved from the primal chaotic space. Most godly kings created a small universe inside their body space. But Luo Feng believed it was more suitable to create a source world, or at least a rudimentary version of one. This choice matched the requirements of the special grade inheritance world life form, whose ultimate goal was a source world. And Luo Feng had also personally observed the complete source world of the land of origin when his heart merged with the supreme rules. With a thought, his distant small universe continuously consolidated divine power and transmitted it to him. The supreme rules imposed no limits on the energy he could use for cultivation. Inside his inner world, endless energy gathered at the core and formed a miniature land that completely imitated the land of origin. 99% of the energy was concentrated there. Beyond it lay a vast void region in which 3,000 miniature universes were born. The endless power of the world from the world life form merged into this miniature world and allowed it to evolve naturally. The miniature land of origin became richer. Flowers, grass, and trees began to appear, and the positions of the 3,000 universes adjusted naturally as vitality emerged within them. The operating laws of this miniature source world were based on the 6 branches of life that Luo Feng had deduced, causing the entire world to overflow with life. After the inner world stabilized, Luo Feng used world reflection and was astonished by its greatly expanded range. Previously, it covered only about 3 primal chaos prefectures. But now it encompassed 16 primal chaos prefectures. Since increasing the range of world reflection was normally extremely difficult, this tremendous leap clearly demonstrated the magnitude of his improvement. Standing in Huyang City, Luo Feng could observe everything within those 16 primal chaos prefectures, down to every speck of dust. Numerous exotic beasts and 12 primal chaos realm beings remained completely unaware that they were being observed. Clothed in silver and standing above Huyang City, his own internal laws accompanied him, causing the nearby supreme rules to temporarily retreat. Various energies, different layers of space and time, and even the entanglements of causality all lay within his perception. Smiling, he realized that he had finally become close to the level of the Emperor of Tienkun. Meanwhile, on Polu Mountain inside Jang Yong's cave mansion, her father contacted her and anxiously asked whether something had happened between her and Moyu Qingyan. He explained that Qingyan had revoked their family's right to use the Purple Cloud Palace in Shangji City, forcing their business to move out, and rumors of their breakup had spread throughout the city. Qingyan had not denied the rumors, and their family business had already suffered greatly. Jang Yong fell silent upon hearing that the usage rights had been withdrawn. When her father pressed for an explanation, she admitted that they had already separated for some time. Shocked and angry, her father could not understand why they had broken up. Jang Yong calmly replied that cultivators came together when they wished and separated when they wished, and she did not need to explain everything to him. She said that her only desire now was to focus entirely on cultivation at Polu Mountain. Her father became furious because his status and business within the family had greatly improved thanks to her relationship with Moyu Qingyan. However, Jang Yong had already made up her mind. Since she had become an eternal true god, it had become difficult for him to control her. Helpless, he could only tell her to seize the opportunity at Polu Mountain and cultivate diligently. Jang Yong agreed, and the transmission ended. Emperor Chu had just ended his cultivation when Through the threads of causality he controlled, he immediately sensed a major change in his direct disciple Luo Feng. The causal link between master and disciple was deeply intertwined, and he clearly felt Luo Feng's life essence surge to a new level, his strength approaching that of a second-realm godly king. Surprised yet pleased, Emperor Chu opened his eyes in the ancient hall of the Flame-Wind ancient country's Chu capital palace and, after briefly perceiving the surrounding laws and causal networks, directly transmitted a summons through causality to Luo Feng. Luo Feng, who had already stepped into the godly king realm and gained stronger control over causal communication, responded instantly and soon arrived at the palace. Upon Luo Feng's arrival, Emperor Chu carefully observed him with penetrating insight. Examining his physical body, soul foundation, and internal world structure, he immediately recognized that Luo Feng's great Tao of life and matter had reached an extremely profound level of integration, forming a physical body of astonishing stability and regenerative power. Emperor Chu praised him without reservation, stating that Luo Feng had already reached an invincible among first-realm godly kings level without relying on external treasures or inheritances, a rarity even across the vast land of origin. Luo Feng, however, modestly denied overstatement, but Emperor Chu dismissed his humility, emphasizing that such achievement was not something that could be understated. Luo Feng then asked for guidance regarding the weaknesses of his current body and what kinds of threats he should be wary of in future battles. Emperor Chu explained in detail that Luo Feng's body had reached a highly condensed and almost indestructible state due to the fusion of life origin vitality and matter origin stability. Even if it were completely annihilated at a single point in time, the boundless vitality embedded within it would allow regeneration from nothingness. In practical terms, unless an opponent could continuously and fully suppress both the physical structure and the life origin recovery simultaneously, Luo Feng could not be truly eradicated. Emperor Chu further analyzed that Luo Feng's clone technique compounded this survivability. Even if one avatar were destroyed, the others would retain enough time and autonomy to activate reincarnation or regeneration techniques. However, he clarified that there were still absolute exceptions in the land of origin, 4 beings capable of truly killing Luo Feng: the 2 ancestors who had transcended the ultimate realm of godly Cain, the ancestor of the East Extreme domain from the previous era, and Emperor Cheng, one of the only contemporary cultivators who had comprehended a complete origin great Tao. These entities operated beyond conventional causal or physical limitations, making them fundamentally unreachable for current godly kings. Emperor Chu emphasized that these beings were generally detached from worldly disputes and unlikely to interfere with Luo Feng at his current level, but still represented absolute existential threats. He then encouraged Luo Feng not to be intimidated by such disparity, pointing out that cultivation progress in the land of origin often defied logic, and even surpassing such figures was not theoretically impossible in the distant future. He advised Luo Feng to maintain caution when dealing with emperors and monarchs, especially those who cultivated the primordial bloodline. Such individuals were continuously eroded by bloodline corruption, which distorted temperament and often made them unpredictable, violent, or unstable in judgment. Emperor Chu then shifted to a deeper explanation of cultivation difficulty, comparing the integration of multiple great Tao branches into a complete origin great Tao to the near impossible task of fusing the 10 basic laws into a unified law of primal chaos. He admitted that even he had not achieved full completion of an origin great Tao. According to him, only Emperor Cheng and the Lord of 10,000 Realms had managed to fully comprehend an origin great Tao independently in the current era. He then outlined the 3 evolutionary paths available to godly kings who reached the ultimate realm. The first and most difficult path was to directly comprehend a complete origin great Tao, requiring extreme talent and insight. The second path, which he himself followed, involved comprehending an ultimate realm level secret technique while still at the peak of the second realm godly king, then using rare primordial materials to complete a forced life-level transformation into the ultimate realm, thereby gaining overwhelming physical and energetic amplification. The third path was the primordial bloodline evolution route, in which a cultivator awakened and refined ancestral bloodline potential to forcibly elevate life structure into the ultimate realm, a method that offered relatively easier entry and higher theoretical upper limits but carried severe instability and risk of losing control. Emperor Chu further analyzed that although emperors and monarchs who followed non-absolute Dao comprehension paths were generally weaker in pure Dao understanding compared to those like the Lord of 10,000 Realms, they compensated through powerful weapon-type secret treasures granted by the ancestors. These treasures allowed them to bridge the gap in combat power, enabling them to contend with top-tier beings such as sector beasts or Dao comprehension experts. He elaborated on the structure of the Flame-Wind ancient country imperial system, describing its 13 emperors, each possessing sector beast-level combat capability and specializing in different domains, making their combined formation extremely dangerous even for higher-level entities. Above them stood the primogenitor Yan Feng, who did not participate in the Land of Origin's internal conflicts, acting as a detached supreme existence. Emperor Chu also discussed the Thunder ancient country, where monarchs all followed the primordial bloodline path under the influence of the Thunder ancestor. Compared to Flame-Wind ancient country's bloodline cultivators, Thunder ancient country's monarchs exhibited even more unstable, aggressive, and terrifying combat characteristics. Beyond these two imperial forces existed the vast population of independent godly kings, whose second realm godly king count far exceeded that of the imperial factions. Within this group were exceptionally talented individuals who cultivated multiple great Daos simultaneously or inherited special grade legacies, allowing them to rival emperors despite not having entered the ultimate realm. Because both imperial clans and independent cultivators competed for scarce cultivation resources, inheritance opportunities, and ultimate realm advancement pathways, conflicts and hostilities were constant and structurally inevitable. On top of that, hidden alien races continuously manipulated events behind the scenes within the Land of Origin, further destabilizing the environment. Emperor Chu warned Luo Feng that as his strength increased, he would inevitably become a target for observation, exploitation, or indirect manipulation, and thus needed to maintain extreme vigilance in all matters. He then transmitted a vast and highly classified informational stream directly into Luo Feng's consciousness, containing intelligence on hidden alien races, records of terrifying ancient beings, maps of major treasure sites, traces of opportunities left behind by Yuan, and detailed dossiers on numerous high-level powerhouses. Only a few supreme entities such as Emperor Chang, the ancestor of the East Extreme Domain, and the transcendent ancestors were omitted in detail due to their unreachable level. Luo Feng carefully absorbed all the information and expressed sincere gratitude to his master. Before ending the discourse, Emperor Chu issued a final warning. Certain godly kings specialized in the origin Tao of causality, granting them the ability to perceive significant causal changes across vast distances. As a result, Luo Feng's breakthrough to godly king level would inevitably be detected soon, and the news of his advancement would spread rapidly throughout the Land of Origin, meaning he must prepare in advance for the resulting attention and potential consequences.